Hi students, in this segment we shall see about the nutrition for adults. We will be exploring the adult physiology, nutritional requirements for the adults and also the nutrition related problems. By the time an individual reaches adulthood, body growth in terms of height and body weight stops to a certain extent. When a person turns into an adult, there is no more growth. He or she does not increase in height. Maybe there is increase in weight, but they have reached a state of equilibrium. But the tissue breakdown and repair of the body tissues continues even among adults. For the tissue breakdown, which occurs as a regular physiological mechanism, and also the repair of body tissues that takes place constantly in our body, nutrients are required for the adults. Therefore, adequate amount of essential nutrients need to be provided for maintenance of physical and mental health. Though nutrients are not required for the growth of the individual, nutrients are required for the purpose of maintenance. Maintenance for the breakdown and the repair of the body tissues. Beginning with adolescent growth and development, there had been significant body changes between the boys and the girls. This profound period of physical change brings sexual maturity and biologic reproductive capacity to initiate new life. During the adolescence, there had been the onset of menarche and puberty in both the girls, and the sexual maturity had also taken place in the boys. Distinct differences in growth patterns emerge between the sexes, and they are strengthened in their young adult bodies. Beginning with adolescent growth and development, significant body changes had taken place in both the sexes. This profound period of physical change brings sexual maturity and biologic reproductive capacity to initiate new life. There had been the onset of menarche in the girls and the puberty in the boys, and therefore the reproductive capacity has been initiated during the period of adolescence. Distinct differences in growth pattern had also occurred during the adolescence, which we refer to as the growth spurt, where there is abundant increase in the height as well as the weight of the individual, and they are strengthened in the young adult bodies. In the female, there is an increasing amount of subcutaneous fat deposit. Subcutaneous means the deposition of adipose tissue below the skin is called a subcutaneous fat deposition. This occurs particularly in the abdominal area. The hip breadth increases in the females and the bony pelvis widens during the young adult phase in preparation for reproduction. A pelvic girdle of subcutaneous fat occur in the females. After the turbulent physical growth and sexual development of adolescents, under the control of growth hormone and the sex hormones, the human body's growth pattern levels off into a state of adult homeostasis. During the adult phase, the physical growth has to a certain extent comes down after the turbulent growth that had taken place during the adolescent period. Adulthood is called as the productive age group. Though adulthood does not feature psychological and social stress as in school age or adolescence, so they don't have lot of psychological or social problems during the adulthood. But the family and the social responsibility of the individual increases during adulthood. This is when they tend to lead an independent living. When a person becomes an adult, they no more depend upon their parents and they try to lead an independent living. And both men and women become the breadwinners for their family. They have to earn, they have to live independently. They should have the potential to support the family. Entry into married life adds to this responsibility, particularly women who should be prepared to bear the physiological stress of pregnancy and lactation. There may be changes in the lifestyle pattern based on their occupation, which may change their eating habits also. If they take up, for example, an IT job, and if they are required to go for the night shifts, of course, during their shifts at night, they'll be consuming food, which we normally don't while we are at home. So there may be changes in the type or in the pattern of the food they eat based upon their employment. The physical and mental stress due to their job, family, and social pressure make adequate nutrition a necessity to safeguard the health of this highly productive age group. Recommended dietary allowances for the adult. We have studied in detail about the recommended dietary allowance specified for the adults earlier. The age, the sex, activity, and body weight of the individual largely determine the nutrient requirements. Since individual variations are high, the ICMR has suggested the recommended allowances based on reference Indian man and women. Let us now see who are the reference man and the reference woman. Let us now see who a reference man is. A reference man is between 18 to 29 years of age. His weight is 60 kilograms. Height is 1.73 meters or 173 centimeters. He has a BMI of 20.3. BMI is body mass index, which is calculated using the formula weight in kg by height in meter square, and that is 20.3. He is free from diseases and physically fit for active work. On each working day, he is engaged in 8 hours of occupation, which usually involves moderate activity. While not at work, he spends about 8 hours in bed, 4 to 6 hours in sitting and moving about, and 2 hours in walking and active recreation or household duties. Such a person is called as a reference man. A reference woman is between the same age, 18 to 29 years of age, and she should be non-pregnant and non-lactating. Weight of the reference woman should be 55 kilogram and height 1.61 meters with a BMI of 21.2. She should be free from diseases and physically fit for active work. On each working day, she is engaged for 8 hours of occupation, which usually involves moderate activity. While not at work, she spends 8 hours in bed, 4 to 6 hours in sitting and moving about, 2 hours in walking, and in active recreation or household duties. Let us now see the nutritional requirements for an adult in detail. Energy requirement. The energy requirement of an individual has been defined as the level of energy intake from food that will balance energy expenditure. The energy that is required for a human being is derived from the food. And this energy derived from food should be equal to the amount of energy he uses. That is called as energy expenditure. When the individual has body size and composition and level of physical activity consistent with long-term good health, and that will allow for maintenance and economically necessary and socially desirable activity. So the whole concept is the amount of energy that is required for a human being will be based upon the amount of energy he consumes in the food that should balance the amount of energy he uses. The components of energy expenditure include the basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy required by an individual for carrying out his physiological mechanisms, which we have studied earlier, and it varies for man and women. Regulatory thermogenesis, which includes the metabolic response to the food ingested and stimuli such as cold, stimulants, and drugs. Based upon the weather, the amount of energy requirement also will vary. Based upon the stimulants, the amount of energy requirement will vary. And it also varies based upon the nature and duration of activity. We have earlier seen that there are three categories of workers: sedentary, moderate, and heavy worker. Based upon the amount of physical work he or she does. The sedentary worker will require less amount of energy since the amount of physical work he does is also less. And the energy requirement also depends upon the duration of the activity. For how many hours he work. He may be a heavy worker. So the number of hours he work also becomes a criteria for the amount of energy the person requires. If he works for 1 hour, the energy requirement may be less for the heavy worker. But if he works for 4 hours or 5 hours or more than that, the amount of energy required by that heavy worker will be more. And the allowances for those engaged in heavy work should be higher than those doing either sedentary or the moderate work, which reflected in the RDA table. Protein requirement. Studies on the Indian adults have revealed that the minimum intake of dietary protein to maintain nitrogen equilibrium. We say nitrogen equilibrium here because protein is the only organic compound which we consume that contains nitrogen. And therefore, nitrogen equilibrium means nitrogen balance. What is nitrogen balance? Nitrogen balance means the amount of protein intake should be equal to the amount of protein that is lost. Intake should be equal to output. So, if the intake and output are same, then it is called as equilibrium. So, the minimum amount of the dietary protein that is required to maintain nitrogen equilibrium is about 0.58 grams per kilogram body weight of the individual per day. So, it is based upon the kilogram body weight of the individual. After allowing for sweat losses, because in the sweat there is some amount of protein that is excreted from the body, the intake works out to 0.7 grams per kilogram. And therefore, the corresponding safe level of intake has been calculated to 0.88 grams per kilogram body weight per day. So for nitrogen equilibrium, we require 0.58 grams per kilogram body weight per day. To this, we are adding the amount that is lost in sweat, and that will amount to 0.7 grams per kilogram body weight per day. And to this, we are adding a safety allowance, and that will amount to 0.88 grams per kilogram body weight per day. Hence, the ICMR has recommended 1 gram protein per kilogram body weight for both men as well as women. The protein needs are not affected by activity, and therefore RDA for protein is 60 grams per day for man because the ideal body weight is 60 kilograms, and 55 grams per day for the women because the ideal body weight is 55 kilograms. So the protein requirement for an adult man is 60 grams per day and adult woman is 55 grams per day. Fat requirement. The two factors that need to be considered while assessing the fat requirement are the invisible fat in the diet, which supplies majority of the essential fatty acids. Fats are of two types. They are the visible fat and the invisible fat. Visible fat are those that we can see, like oil, ghee, butter. Invisible fat are those that are present in the food, but we cannot see them. The fat that are present in the pulses, those that are present in the millet cereals, they are not visible. And the essential fatty acids are those that cannot be synthesized by the body, and that has to be provided by the food. So the invisible fat in the diet which supplies majority of the essential fatty acid requirement. So this invisible fat will provide most of the essential fatty acids. A certain amount of visible fat is required to meet requirements of the two essential fatty acids. They are the linoleic acid and the linolenic acid. We also have another essential fatty acid which is called as the arachidonic acid. But this arachidonic acid can be synthesized from linolenic acid. Therefore, here only two fatty acids are mentioned, linoleic acid and linolenic acid. The requirement of linoleic acid has been estimated to be 3% of the total energy requirement. So, if the energy requirement is say 100 kilocalories, 3% of it. So, 3 kilocalories should be derived from fat, which can be met by 12 grams of visible fat. So, the point is here, 12 grams of visible fat is required in the form of oil or ghee or butter to provide 3% of the total energy. To provide energy density and palatability. Energy density means more amount of energy is derived from fat. 1 gram of carbohydrate gives only 4 kilocalories, whereas 5 kilocalories. So it is a energy dense nutrient. And palatability. Palatability is it improves the taste of the food. The ICMR has suggested 30 grams for man and 25 grams for women of visible fat per day. Okay, earlier we saw for the essential fatty acid requirement, only 12 grams are recommended. But taking into consideration the energy density and the palatability, ICMR is recommending 25 grams per day for women and 30 grams per day for man. The type of visible fat used is also very important. Oils containing high amount of saturated fatty acids may increase the linoleic acid requirement and are detrimental to health. Hence, combination of oils with equal proportion of saturated, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids have been recommended. There are oils that contain saturated fat like the coconut oil and palm oil. But the other vegetable oils are unsaturated. The unsaturation of the fat may be monounsaturated when there is only a single unsaturated linkage, whereas polyunsaturated fatty acids indicate that there are several unsaturated linkages in the fatty acid. The polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats or fatty acids are present only in the vegetable fats, while most of the animal fats are saturated. And among the vegetable oils, the coconut oil and the palm oil are saturated.